oftentimes as a teenager, I would really resent the fact that sometimes if you were to ask my friends to describe me, they would use words like, oh, April's so sweet, she's so happy, and she's so bubbly, and she's so easy to get along with. Because the truth is, as a teenager, you don't want to hear things like that about yourself. You want to hear words like, oh, she's cool, she's hip, she's with the it crowd. And the fact remains that a lot of times if you're happy and bubbly, you don't necessarily belong to the it crowd. But it's funny how God has a way of revealing truths along the way to you about who you really are and what He's designed you to be. And the fact that I'm bubbly and easy to get along with may mean that I have some sort of gifting from Him because of that, because not everybody necessarily has that. And so after numerous spiritual gifts testing and the words and wisdom of friends, I kind of have come to find out that maybe I have this gift of encouragement after all. And it's not just something that randomly appeared there. It's something that God has truly gifted me with. And so when I find out these things about myself, I want to be able to find out ways, okay, well, it's here. I want to know how to apply it to my life. And I want to see examples of how this gift of encouragement looks in other people, specifically in the scriptures. And so a couple of years ago, I was lucky enough to run across this Bible study by Beth Moore. And Beth Moore was talking about the life of Paul, and one of the characters that he kind of runs into his journey with is Barnabas. And the unfortunate thing is that sometimes we just hear the story about Paul and Barnabas where they have this argument, and it kind of boils up and they decide to split ways. But what I want to take a look at right now is the actual beginning of the relationship between Paul and Barnabas. And a great place to start that is just to look at who Barnabas is. We see Barnabas kind of pop up in Acts 4, verses 36 and 37, where it says, Joseph, a Levite from Cyprus, whom the apostles called Barnabas, which means son of encouragement, sold a field he owned and brought the money and put it at the apostles' feet. So Barnabas must have done something right, because his name literally means son of encouragement. So to me, when I first read this, I thought, okay, this is the gift that I have. I would love to be named based on the fact that I was such a great encourager. I would love that to be the title of my name. And so I wanted to see a little bit more. And again, I just talked about how she describes the relationship between Paul and Barnabas at the beginning, kind of when they sort to meet. And I want to be able to share that with you tonight. So if we take a look at Acts 9, verses 26 through 28, just to sort of set these verses up, I talked about Paul and doing a study with Paul. And Paul was this guy who before, we often use the terms of Christianity, Saul and Paul, sometimes kind of interchangeably at certain points in his life. Because before his conversion experience on the Damascus Road, Paul's name was Saul. But when he became a believer, his name was changed. And so the point when he shows up here in Acts 9 is when his name is still Saul. He has gone places to persecute Christians. His story follows him throughout the Christian world because he is such an evil man. He just is out to persecute. He's out to kill Christians. He's out to get them. And so that's where we start off when we read here in verse 26. Again, this is 9:26 through 28. When he came to Jerusalem, he tried to join the disciples, but they were all afraid of him, not believing that he really was a disciple. But Barnabas took him and brought him to the apostles. He told them how Saul on his journey had seen the Lord, and that the Lord had spoken to him, and how in Damascus he had preached fearlessly in the name of Jesus. So Saul stayed with them and moved about freely in Jerusalem, speaking boldly in the name of the Lord. So we see here in 26, like I just said, this guy has a reputation, this guy Saul. He has a history of persecuting Christians. So just like the rest of us, if he walked in this room today, we would be afraid of him too. Lots of us would be thinking in the back of our minds, he's just here to trick us. He just wants to hear us say the name Jesus. He's going to drag us off to jail and beat us. And so this is kind of the mentality that's floating around this era of disciples, this room of disciples. And so it would continue to, be this way, except in verse 27, there's two key words there at the beginning of the verse. It says, but Barnabas. So Barnabas sees and hears what's going on, but he decides to change the course of action and do something different. And it says, but Barnabas took him, so it's almost like we can literally see him taking Saul, or Paul here, and bringing him into the circle of disciples. Now, Barnabas is laying down his reputation here. He is saying, I believe, I have seen what this man Paul has done. He has been converted by the only Jesus. And so he's not only is laying down his reputation, but he's lending his own credibility of Paul to the disciples. And this idea of encouragement, the literal meaning of it really means just to simply come alongside of someone. And we can almost see it when he's bringing in Paul into this circle of the disciples. He has come alongside of him and brought him in. And in verse 28, we see, so Saul stayed with them and moved about freely in Jerusalem, speaking boldly in the name of the Lord. It worked. You know, of course, it's something that God has already ordained, but he used Barnabas as a tool to, bring Saul into his kingdom, bring Saul into this circle of apostles, of men who were founders of the early church, who go on to be martyrs for his name. And Barnabas was a huge difference in bringing this man, Paul, into the circle. Done? How much time is that?